It started with her laughter. Not the quiet kind she gave me over dinner or the tired chuckles late at night when she was half asleep. No. This was loud, carefree, echoing through the foyer as she stepped inside, heels clicking, suitcase wheels scraping slightly across the tile. "Home sweet home," she called out, tossing her coat on the rack like she hadn't been gone for 4 days. I was standing by the hallway mirror, pretending to fix my tie. I hadn't worn it all day. I just put it on 30 seconds before she pulled into the driveway. Not for her. For me. Because I needed to feel composed. Collected. Like a man who had spent the last 96 hours doing something other than quietly dismantling the pieces of his marriage. Her name's Delaney. That name probably doesn't ring a bell. It shouldn't. She likes it that way, says being memorable makes you predictable. I used to think that was poetic. Now it just sounds like something a person says when they're hiding. She walked in all glow and sunshine, like she just stepped off a movie set. Hair curled, face radiant, like she hadn't missed a single night of sleep. I almost admired how flawless she looked. It takes a certain kind of person to carry that kind of ease, especially when they don't know what's coming. "Trip go well?" I asked, my voice measured. "Better than expected," she smiled, wheeling her red carry-on past me and toward the kitchen. "You wouldn't believe how much we got done in just 3 days. Total client turnaround. I think we landed the whole account." Her tone was breezy, upbeat. She kissed me on the cheek, just a little too quickly, like she didn't want to linger. That was her first mistake. I waited until she poured herself a glass of her favorite Chardonnay and started flipping through the mail. Then I picked up the small cardboard box from the hallway table and placed it on the kitchen island. She glanced at it, eyebrows raised. "What's this?" I didn't answer. I just nudged it slightly closer to her. Delaney opened it with one hand, wine glass still in the other. She peeled back the flaps casually until she saw what was inside. 2 objects. That's all. A single photograph. And a small, sealed envelope. Her hand froze. The color in her face changed almost instantly, from bright and flushed to pale and unsure. She reached for the photo first. I watched her eyes scan it, trying to make sense of what she was looking at. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't even confrontational. Just a shot from across the street. Her outside the Claremont Hotel in Phoenix, where her business trip supposedly happened, standing far too close to a man in a dark suit, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. The timestamp said 11:42 p.m. She'd told me she was asleep by 10:30. Her smile evaporated. Her body didn't move, but everything in the room changed. The air got heavier, the silence stretched tight. She opened the envelope next. I could hear the paper tremble in her hands. Inside? A receipt. Not for a meal. Not for a cab. A spa appointment. 2 guests. Romantic couples massage. Room charge billed under her maiden name. Her voice, when it came, was soft. Not guilty, but cautious. "Where did you get this?" I stared at her for a long time. Not in anger. Not in sadness. Just clarity. "I asked you to bring me a souvenir from your trip," I said slowly. "I figured I'd find it myself." Delaney set the wine down. Hard. But didn't say a word. Her fingers twitched slightly, like she was trying to summon some version of herself that knew how to fix this. But it was too late for that. And she knew it. This wasn't just a lie. It was a story she rehearsed, one she never thought I'd question. But I did. And I wasn't even close to done yet. Because what she didn't know was that this man she met, he wasn't a stranger. He was connected to me, in a way that would change everything. It's strange how silence can shift shapes depending on where you stand. Before, it was comforting, the quiet hum of routine. The clink of her tea mug at 7:03. The creak of the hallway floor when she tiptoed into the kitchen before her morning Zoom calls. The low buzz of the fridge at night when we both lay awake but didn't talk, just shared air. Now, silence wears a different sound. That night, after she'd seen what was in the box, the photo, the envelope, Delaney didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't ask if I had followed her. She just sat at the edge of the bed, in the dark, slowly untying the laces of her boots like it was any other Thursday. The way she avoided looking at me, that was what really made something inside me shift. Not guilt. Not shame. But calculation. She was buying time. I stood in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her shoulders as they rose and fell slower than usual, like her breath was stuck in the space between 2 lives. After several minutes, she spoke. "You've been quiet." I didn't respond. Another pause. I guess I deserve that. Still nothing. She finally looked up. Not directly at me, just toward me, like checking to see if I'd vanished. You think I planned all this? She asked. That was the first real sentence. And the way she said it, like she was already writing her version of the story, positioning herself as the misunderstood one. Didn't you? I asked, not coldly, just honestly. Delaney stood up and walked toward the closet, grabbing one of my old hoodies. Hers was still in the dryer from before she left. She pulled it over her head like it belonged to her. And maybe it still did. I didn't even know. I didn't plan to fall into anything, Marlon, she said, finally using my name. It was just a window. A moment. A weird, blurry, stupid moment. That word again, moment, like it existed separate from all the rest of time. I stepped into the bedroom fully now, slowly, without raising my voice. It was a weekend, Delaney. That's not a moment. That's a vacation. She winced, but only slightly. Then she turned and leaned against the dresser, arms crossed now too, a mirror of my earlier posture. Maybe unconsciously. Maybe a tactic. I didn't sleep with him, she said suddenly. Not I didn't cheat. Not I wasn't unfaithful. Just that one detail. And I believed her. But not in the way she hoped. See, I knew she hadn't slept with him. That wasn't the part that mattered. Because what I'd found in the box, the photo, the envelope, that was just the surface. That was what she thought I knew. But what she didn't know was that I had listened. Not through walls. Through voices. Her voice. And his. There was a phone call, one she didn't know I'd heard. Not recorded. Just overheard. By accident. Maybe fate. Maybe cruel irony. She made it the night before she left, standing in the backyard while I washed dishes. I wasn't supposed to hear. But I did. And the things she said, they weren't about passion. Or even love. They were about choice. About freedom. About needing something that felt alive again. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about him. It was about everything I wasn't. Not reckless. Not wild. Not spontaneous. Just dependable. Reliable. Safe. The man who always replaced the batteries in the smoke detectors before they beeped. Who always filled her car with gas when she didn't notice it was low. Who knew which drawer she kept her migraine pills in and made sure they were never empty. That was me. And she was bored. That night, after her half-denial and my half-belief, we slept in the same bed. Back to back. Breathing the same air, but separated by something wider than any mattress. And I didn't know it then, but this was just the shallow end. The plunge was still coming. She left her phone on the nightstand. Not locked. Not face down. Just there. Bare. Open like a wound that didn't realize it was bleeding. I didn't touch it. Not immediately. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching the ceiling shift in faint moonlight. Her breath was slow behind me. Controlled. Maybe she thought she'd said enough. Maybe she thought the lie had landed softly enough to be forgiven by morning. She was wrong. Around 3 a.m., I gave in. I didn't go digging. I didn't scroll through photos or search her call history. I just opened the Notes app. The last entry was untitled. Timestamped the day before she flew home. I tapped it. It wasn't a confession. It was a rehearsal. Marlon doesn't need to know. He's steady, not stupid. Keep it simple. Don't cry unless he cries first. Tell him it was a one-off. Tell him it didn't mean anything. Mean it when you say it. I blinked. Then read it again. It wasn't just the content. It was the tone. She wasn't preparing for guilt. She was preparing for performance. There were 5 more drafts just like that. One where she blamed her loneliness. Another where she painted me as distant, even cold. Each one more careful than the last. None of them true. I didn't say a word when I set her phone back down. I didn't wake her. I didn't scream. I just sat there until the light started bleeding into the curtains. And in that hour, something in me started to shift. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Something quieter. Like the sound of a house settling, just before it cracks. I didn't go looking for anything. I opened the drawer because I needed tape. That's it. A roll of tape. I was going to fix a torn envelope from a birthday card my nephew sent last week. I remember holding the ripped paper and thinking, some things can be mended. It felt noble at the time. The tape was behind a stack of old receipts. Grocery lists. Scraps of her planner pages torn out and never thrown away. I pushed past the mess, not thinking. Not searching. Then I saw it. A folded paper. Thick. Worn at the edges. Yellowed slightly, like it had been opened too many times. I only noticed it because my name was on the outside. In her handwriting. It wasn't hidden. Just tucked. I unfolded it. It was a to-do list. But not the kind with chores. This one was titled, "If I leave Marlon, things to prepare." I stopped breathing for a second. She had written it in numbered points. Cancel joint gym membership. Remove emergency contact from bank profile. Transfer autopay to personal account. Pack only essentials. Leave the rest. Keep it calm. No arguing. Don't cry. Don't say, I never loved you. It sounds cruel. Leave the dog with him. I don't know how long I stared at it. It wasn't recent. The date at the top said February 7. That Sunday, she made soup. She only makes soup when she wants to feel normal. I've always known that. Delaney doesn't love cooking. She's clinical about it, precise, efficient, but emotionless. Like everything else in her life. Checklists, systems, habits. But when she's trying to reattach herself to something, to us, to herself, she cooks. Not out of joy. Out of necessity. As if boiling carrots could fix silence. I watched her slice celery thinner than I ever could. Heard the blade hitting the cutting board like a metronome. Not fast. Not slow. Just constant. Then came the moment I didn't expect. She opened a spice jar I didn't recognize. Not mine. Not hers. I asked, "What's that?" She glanced over. Bay leaf blend, she said casually. New brand. But her hand froze midair. She didn't remember where she got it. Not instantly, anyway. I could tell. Her eyes shifted slightly, calculating the safest answer. And I realized something. That tiny glass jar held more danger than any message or photo ever could. Because it didn't belong here. And neither did she anymore. The smell filled the kitchen, earthy, rich, too bold for how she usually seasons anything. I sat at the counter, pretending to scroll through my phone, when really I was memorizing every unfamiliar motion. The way she stirred clockwise, not counter. The way she tasted with her left hand, not her right. The way she hummed, a song I'd never heard her hum before. And then she said it. Casually. Like it was nothing. He said bay leaf gives it depth. I looked up slowly. She didn't realize she'd said it out loud. Not until the silence after. She stopped stirring. Her eyes met mine, and something in her face faltered, not panic. Worse. A brief, flickering regret for having let the real world slip through her lips. But only for a moment. Then she smiled. A weak one. I meant, on the cooking show I watched. I nodded. Said nothing. But everything was different now. I took one bite of that soup. Just one. It tasted like something she'd learned somewhere else. With someone else. And for the rest of the evening, I let her pretend. Because I wanted to see how long she could stand in the ruins pretending they were still walls. That night, we watched a movie together. Her head on my shoulder. My arm around her. And in my head, the only thing I could think was, she's still acting like she's home. But I had already started letting her go. Quietly. Inch by inch. It hadn't rained in days. The sky had been dry and cold, the kind of weather where the sun glows but doesn't warm you. And yet, that morning, there was a folded blue umbrella leaning against the wall by the front door. I stood staring at it for nearly a full minute. It wasn't mine. And I knew it wasn't hers either, not because I'd memorized our possessions like an obsessive man, but because Delaney hates umbrellas. Says they're awkward. Says she'd rather get wet. She'd said it at least a dozen times, always with that stubborn, playful tone, the one she used when she was trying to make me laugh during long drives. But there it was. Tall, navy blue, neatly folded. A small leather handle that didn't match anything we owned. No tag. No store sticker. Just placed there. Like it belonged. At breakfast, I didn't mention it. I watched her open the fridge, reach for almond milk, and pause when she noticed my eyes following her. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just didn't sleep much. She nodded, pouring the milk into her coffee like she hadn't left traces of another life in our hallway. When she left for work, coat over her arm, bag on her shoulder, I watched her pass right by the umbrella. She didn't glance at it. She didn't move it. She didn't even notice it. But that's what undid me. Because if she had seen it and ignored it, I could have believed it was hers. I could have played the part, confused husband, maybe mistaken, maybe paranoid. But the fact that she didn't see it at all told me everything I needed to know. It had become invisible to her. Familiar. Something that had been in her hand recently enough for her brain not to register it as out of place. And it struck me, she hadn't been hiding things from me anymore. She was just forgetting I existed in certain parts of her life. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But in those other spaces, the ones where she moved differently, spoke differently, thought differently, she no longer pictured me in the background. I wasn't a point of reference. I was just the man who brewed her coffee in the morning and asked how her day went at night. She'd build a new room in her mind. And I didn't live there. So I picked up the umbrella, opened the front door, and laid it gently against the outside wall, next to the recycling bin. Not as a threat, not as a message, just as a return. She'd either notice, or she wouldn't, and both answers would speak volumes. I opened the wall calendar only because the internet was down. Strange how that detail matters. How something as minor as a router blinking red can lead you to answers you weren't looking for. The kitchen calendar was always hers. She liked it old school. Said phone apps didn't feel real. I used to tease her for it. What, you don't trust the cloud? She'd smile, then write in her perfect print. Dentist, grocery, gym, brunch, Denver. Denver. That was the word. Written in soft gray pencil. Faint. Almost erased. Like she'd tried to wipe it, then forgot to finish the job. I touched the letters. The pressure of them. Still there. No date next to it. No return time. No client retreat or conference. Just a word. Denver. She never told me she was going. Not ever. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking about plane tickets or hotel rooms. I was thinking about the coffee mug. A white porcelain mug with a red mountain design and the word altitude printed on the side. She brought it home last year. Said a colleague forgot it at the office and didn't want it back. I believed her. Because I wanted to. But now that same mug was sitting in the dishwasher. Used. And not by me. She never drinks from it. Says it's too thick-lipped. Too heavy. But someone did. And just like that, I saw it, not a timeline. Not a full picture. Just cracks. A weekend unaccounted for. A trip unspoken. A mug used by someone she never introduced. And still, I didn't ask. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just picked up the pencil from the drawer beneath the calendar and erased the word completely, not out of denial, but because now I didn't need it there to know it happened. Some truths don't need ink. They already live in the spaces we don't talk about. She didn't say goodbye, not with words, anyway. I came home from work on a Tuesday and found the keys on the kitchen counter. Just the house key and the one to the mailbox. No note. No suitcase by the door. No crying. No explanations taped to the fridge. But the closet was emptier. Her coat wasn't hanging. Her perfume wasn't on the shelf. And the pair of boots she always said she hated, but wore anyway, were gone. So I sat. Not in anger. Just in stillness. For a long time, I thought healing would come with closure. With confessions. With some great unraveling moment where she finally said, here's why. But the truth is, I stopped needing that a while ago. The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt quiet. And that night, I slept better than I had in months. In the morning, I made coffee. Not for two, just one. And it tasted different. Not because it was better. Just because it was mine. Later that week, I donated the blue umbrella to a shelter downtown. I took the mug, the one from Denver, and left it in the break room at work. Someone else can use it. It doesn't mean anything now. I started playing the piano again. Not well. Not confidently. But I let my fingers touch the keys without worrying about who could hear. And I opened the windows more. The air feels good in this place when it's moving. A few neighbors asked about Delaney. I just said, she's okay. We're just going different directions. And I meant it. Because this quiet, this peace, it's not emptiness. It's space. And in that space, I finally remembered who I was before I was trying to hold together something already gone. I don't know where she is, but I know where I am. Here. Whole. Still me. And somehow better.